So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I wanted to start by saying that I've been enormously impressed with both the quality and the attention that wargaming's been having within the French military, within the French government system, and I'm really excited for the direction of travel that it's going in and the future opportunities for collaborative working. So, to start off with, it is working. As a quick introduction about me, I'm a professional wargamer with the British government. I've been in this environment for about 5.5 years now, and before that was a hobbyist and amateur wargamer since probably as long as I can remember. I had an academic background in mechanical and marine engineering, and so a lot of the games that I do approach the problem set from, I take a mathematics and systems thinking approach to, and focusing on often quite mechanical systems, but attempting to utilize these mathematical approaches for resolving quite complex strategic problems that have heavily existed within the qualitative challenge space. I spent about 4.5 years at the Defence Wargaming Centre, which is the Ministry of Defence's in-house exercising and challenge function, which is itself owned by the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL. Whilst I was at DSTL, one of the most visible products that I was involved in the development of is Contested, which we will be running a demonstration play of this afternoon. It is the flagship product of what were called boxed generic strategic wargames, developed under a program intending to explore the art of the possible within strategic wargames and produce a set of tools and products designed to exist at higher readiness to be rapidly deployed towards strategic challenges as requested by senior planners. In January 2024, I left DSTL and moved to the Cabinet Office, specifically to the Cobra unit, and I'll discuss a bit more of that in a moment, where I have been the unit's lead for the design and delivery of a variety of exercises and wargames across government, moving from a team of 60 to now a team of 2. I design the exercises, and my boss decides how we're going to apply them and who we're going to attempt to influence with them. For some brief details on the Cobra unit itself, it's the UK government's centralised function for crisis management. It's popularly known as Cobra, so the bottom bit, as in the snake, and it is often referred to as such in the UK media, even though it is actually spelled COBR. Cobra refers to Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, which is often cited in UK media as the forum under which the UK government plans for the most exigent crises. There is in fact no Briefing Room A. We have briefing rooms D, F, G, and M, but that doesn't make a nice pretty acronym, so we don't use those. The Cobra unit is a combination of physical meeting spaces existing at a variety of classifications up to the highest, with information management and communications equipment designed to support the government's senior emergency planners in producing a response to theoretically any developing crisis and to be able to communicate their insights and decisions from that meeting worldwide if necessary. My specific role within the Cobra unit is the exercising technical lead for the Crisis Management Excellence Programme. The programme was established in 2023 as one of the early insights out of COVID, which indicated that crisis managers across the UK were lacking in professional skills and a standardised approach to crisis management, with this programme being developed to establish a common set of baseline skills and a level of understanding that had previously been absent in crisis management. This has been conducted primarily to enhance upstream resilience ahead of a crisis, so to give crisis managers the skills that they need to be able to better respond. We are achieving this through a combination of policy development, the production of a new set of new government doctrine on crisis management due to be published over the summer, an intensive training and community outreach programme, and finally with an exercising and red teaming function, which is where my role sits. The combination of the training and the community outreach is our 3-part foundation pathway. The first part is e-learning on UK government's crisis doctrine, which is conducted in about 2 hours. The second stage is a full day of in-person crisis training delivered by a practitioner within the Cobra unit, and usually we like to incorporate a tour of either one of the aforementioned Cobra rooms or the National Situation Centre. However, these rooms often being called into a national emergency response does mean that this is not a facility we can always deliver. The final part is the part that I've led the development on, which is a crisis management exercise. Quite simply, we give people a crisis and we tell them to manage it. We found that this form of training is almost unique across government in that it challenges people to practice their crisis management skills whilst also having to operate across multiple government departments, a requirement that too often has only manifested when people have actively been called into a crisis response, at which point it is logically too late, as evidenced by a multitude of recent public inquiries. Separately to this, we have recently launched training aimed at senior practitioners. Firstly, our Top Crisis Leaders programme, which is aimed at Deputy Director Generals and Permanent Secretaries, the most senior level civil servants within the UK system, and more recently with Tools for Crisis Leadership, aimed at the 1-star and 2-star level. In both of these training programs, we incorporate a combination of in-person teaching about essential skills and exercising in order to be able to place these skills into practice. We've consistently demonstrated that the utilization of exercising and wargaming as a training and policy development tool is showing its utility and its acceptability even to potentially skeptical senior audiences. The quality of the feedback alone we've received has been extraordinary, and we've now delivered this foundation pathway training to over 1,000 civil servants from every UK government department, ranged from the most junior to the most senior levels, consistently receiving exceptional responses. I wanted to talk about the requirements for about the challenges involved in building war games across government, starting out with how does you go about capturing requirements and ensuring that your stakeholders are bought in. One thing I found with moving out of the Ministry of Defence space and moving into the rest of government is that no government department works in exactly the same way. There are different power structures, different roles and responsibilities, and even the way in which one department will define what constitutes an emergency or what constitutes a strategic challenge will be radically different depending on its priorities, budget, and even the personalities that are involved at running the department at the senior civil service and ministerial level. One thing that's become abundantly clear is that the national security community needs to better understand that it cannot afford to be as exclusive as it has been previously. If you were to ask someone within the UK system which government departments constitute the national security community, you would usually get responses to the effect of the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign Office, and the Home Office, our Ministries of Defence, Foreign Affairs, and the Interior. The problem with this is that whilst these departments will often lead on a number of national security challenges, they are far from being the only actors that are represented. In the crisis management training that we've been delivering across government, the crisis that we utilise is a response that is led by our Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, but requires responses to feed into it from almost every government ministry, including the aforementioned home, foreign and defence sectors, but also transportation, education, healthcare. A series of exercises have demonstrated that departments like the Ministry of Defence and the Foreign Office will too often make unsafe assumptions about how other government departments work, particularly those such as healthcare, education, employment, and finance, that they don't consider as being a core part of the response. So even in their exercises, they either won't consult them or will introduce them so late in the process that errors that they have made in their planning cannot be rectified in time to achieve the exercise. This carries an obvious limitation to the quality of the insights that are being generated, and it's a key mission of the Cabinet Office for breaking down these boundaries and these barriers to achieving success by actually getting government departments to talk to each other. We've identified that the vast majority of exercises that we do tend to conduct across government are tabletop exercises, so the format in which you will be presented with a scenario and asked a set of facilitated questions based on a plan, a requirement, or a concept. One of the biggest challenges that we have found is getting people to move beyond this, for understanding that you can build quote-unquote smarter exercises for examining the crisis response and even contingency planning and policy development across the whole of government, as some of the products that we have seen on display over the last 3 days demonstrate. Another challenge is that planners won't often appreciate the value of doing an exercise. It can feel like a rather long-winded and potentially expensive way of examining a requirement, where the policy process of developing a research paper can often be seen as good enough for the circumstances. The solution we found to this is for making sure that you're able to effectively demonstrate how the work that you're doing and how the exercises you're building link into the policy process and the requirements that have been stated by your seniors, including in terms of corporate development if necessary. At the same time, we've also been working on how do you develop the knowledge and skills required to sustain a healthy and effective exercising and wargaming capability across government. One of the first challenges is the concept of resilience, which in emergency planning is the key component of how you're able to respond to a challenging set of circumstances. There's a certain irony in that within the UK government, groups and units responsible for delivering this resilience are rarely resilient in of themselves. It's too often the case in which you have human single points of failure, in which a key person being absent for the duration of a response or two responses occurring in parallel means that you are unable to deliver the desired effect at full capacity, risking overworking existing staff or under-delivering on your capability. In either case, there is a serious risk to effectively delivering a crisis management response. There is also the enduring debate over the word wargaming and gaming. I know that in a number of languages there are considerations for coming up with alternatives to terms like Kriegspiel. I have heard Planspiel is often used as an alternative by some German wargamers as part of their incorporation in government. Within the UK, a term that is being used increasingly is serious gaming. Personally, I dislike this term. I have reservations about it, that it is just replacing one problem with a slightly different one. So I've reverted to my background in engineering and have instead choosing to utilize static versus dynamic gaming. I would categorize a scripted tabletop exercise as a static exercise by virtue of the fact that it doesn't move around the actions of the players. A full war game, like Contested, I would describe as a dynamic game by virtue of the fact that the scenario inject received on turn 2 is conditional upon the outcomes of the actions taken by the players in turn 1. One thing we have found is that there is an essential need to develop all of these skills, some of which I have listed on this table, and it's too often the case that we're relying on people self-teaching themselves. An approach that we're provisionally taking in the short term is for increasing the number of exercises that we're delivering on a routine basis, and the foundation pathway certainly helps with this. Is being able to bring new practitioners along to our sessions and using them to give them the opportunity to facilitate one of the turns that we're delivering, or to lead a red teaming session, or to try their hand at an adjudication system. It's very much taking the logic of that exercises should be a safe-to-fail environment, of bringing newer practitioners along and challenging them to be safe to fail at delivering the exercise, but with a more skilled practitioner on hand in order to ensure that the learning objectives of the exercise as a whole are met and to provide immediate feedback that can be used to supporting their development objectives. I've really taken an interest in the development of generic and modular games, of which Contested and a variety of others on availability today are great examples of. What I mean by modular games is a product that's more of a set of rules and tools as opposed to a specific game with a scenario in mind. This allows us to have this forward-positioned strategic war game at a higher level of readiness than we might normally be able to achieve, so that when a request does come in from my director, Roger Hargreaves, about he wants a war game on this topic and he wants it to happen next week, I can deliver that for him. Because if I turn around to him and tell him that, well, Roger, that's going to take me 6 weeks to develop and require this amount of playtesting and this amount of money, he's already lost interest by the time I've finished saying that and is looking for something else to answer his question for him. Another approach is through the use of structured training programs. So with Foundation Pathway Module 3, we launched the program 10 months ago, and in that time we've delivered it 57 times to over 1,000 civil servants from every UK government department and a whole host of executive agencies and frontline commands. It's by doing this on the regular that we are able to ensure that we keep our skills going and can support the professional development of the next generation of professional wargamers who will be rotating into positions after us. I also include this last point of don't throw anything away. It's a point I've found to make as I've developed more exercises and wargames across government, particularly when I come up with an idea of developing a mechanic at times when I'm out for a run or can't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. What I've often found is that I'll write a mechanic using this process for a wargame that could be for the Department for Health or for the Department for the Environment. And it sort of works for the wargame that I'm thinking of. I might keep it in, I might replace it after a playtest. But what I will do is I'll put it to the side and think, I've got a wargame about policing coming up in a month's time. I think this might work for that. And it's finding opportunities to reuse material that's such a powerful enabler. I wanted to give a quick example of one of these mechanics in practice, and if you do come to the contested playthrough, you will see this working. The mechanism is designed to resolve the challenge of, within a strategic wargame, you have to link actions and consequences through an adjudication mechanism in order to generate that next turn briefing. But one of the problems with strategic wargames and decisions made at the policy and ministerial level is that you can either have an adjudication that is fast or accurate, not both. By taking this approach, by having a structured set of rules under which the actions can be adjudicated and a finite number of actions, it means that you can plot all of the outcomes to these actions in advance. It means that you can run an adjudication system for a strategic wargame in less than a minute for each individual action, a significantly powerful enabler for ensuring that the attendants' interest remains focused and that they keep their eyes on the topic, ensuring further quality of training and insight. It also means that you can quality assure it, that for every action that you're conducting within a specialized domain, be it cyber, chemical or biological defense, special operations, or anything like that, you can reach out to that community in advance and say, I am representing you within this strategic wargame using this approach, and I'm assuming that this action hypothetically causes these 4 potential outcomes. Am I right, or am I making an incorrect assumption that's leading to people learning the wrong lessons about how you are and what you do? Within contested logic, I achieved this by consulting in its development with the head of wargaming at GCHQ, the UK's cyber defense arm, in which the 5 cyber actions conducted within the game were jointly developed in a shining example of collaborative working across government, which is a process that we are attempting to normalise more effectively. So generally, some final thoughts is that exercises don't need to be complicated. There's a joke that was made to me a while ago saying that men will invent Warhammer instead of going to therapy. I consider exercising and wargaming to be a form of therapy for when it comes to developing more effective policies. You don't need to come up with an effective wargame, to come up with a super detailed wargame that does absolutely everything that government ever does. You need to find something that works. You need to find something that's reliable and that can helpfully contribute to the decision. Successful deliveries boost the visibility and credibility of exercising and wargaming so much, and seniors absolutely love it when you can come back to them with a presented material of outlining how you succeeded, how you met their objectives, particularly if you can produce a data visualization, given how much of senior decision-making is based on that kind of information flow. For some general advice for how to get more involved, how to experience more and learn more from other people, the first thing I would recommend is do more of this. It's come to events like this. Be prepared to play the games, to ask the designers how they went about building it, what were the challenges they faced. Every year, there's the increasing series of Connections wargaming conferences. So Connections UK is occurring at Brunel University at the start of September. With the conference in Japan having been a few months ago, and I know that there's plans for the online Connections Next Gen for younger practitioners, and eventually a desire for a Connections EU at some point in the future. These are my contact details on the screen. So if you do have any burning questions about how to get more involved in wargaming, or any information that the UK government's perspective might have on the challenges we've faced and how to improve this kind of cross-government wargaming, that is where I can be found. And we also have a QR code, which we think works, as a link to our foundation path, as a link to the CMET platform, which is this incredible online resource we've been developing for linking crisis practitioners across the UK and enabling a much stronger kind of collaborative working in the run-up to, during, and the aftercare phases of a major government crisis. I think we've got some time until the next speaker, so I can take a few questions.
What kind of diffusion of your war game are you aiming at? Like, are you seeking to export it in other countries or only within the UK?
So with regards to distributing war games internationally, I'd personally like to see wargaming used as widely as possible, as long as the games are still good. If I make a terrible war game, I'd like people to tell me it's terrible, and then I'd like them to stop playing it and to forget it ever happened, and then to use it as a learning experience. With good games, I'd like to see them proliferated and used as widely as possible. There have been some wonderful examples of really fantastic games that don't get celebrated anywhere near as much as they should. And I very much err on the side of analytical games that have defined rules about how they work. But generally, that also means you can pack the rules into a PDF and just send it to someone.
Thank you for your speech. It was very insightful. Did you find some resistance when you want to implement wargaming and other type of gaming in the administration? Or there is everyone is very happy to use these tools, or like some kind in France, there is some resistance because when I see wargaming, I see gaming, and I imagine some people playing at just a game.
No, that's a very valid point. It is definitely a problem that we are still facing in the UK. That you have, it comes from the fact that wargaming as a word has become increasingly unhelpful. In that people don't like the war part, people don't like the gaming part, and often you'll find that as people that are looking from that approach will often have quite cynical motivations for doing so. In that, if you're concerned that the exercise or the war game that's being proposed is looking at your policy area in a way that you perhaps don't want people to look to, because it would, the British idiom is airing your dirty laundry. It's exposing flaws in your planning, and you perhaps don't want those to be exposed because you're embarrassed about them. People have often latched on to either the war component or the gaming component as a means of delegitimizing the analytical activity. It is a real problem, and I'd be lying if I said we'd found the solution to that. But what works has been slowly chipping away. It's by going to as many different government departments as we can, from learning about how they work, delivering something for them, and gradually improving the quality of the product as we demonstrate that we do understand them, we want to help them, but also we're not going to go away just because they want us to. Thank you all very much for coming.